Hey, Gamespace.com. Damien here with my good friend Matt, and we are going to talk Star Wars Squadrons
All of the Star
here
Wars Squadrons.
today. All of the Star Wars Squadrons. We have had the opportunity to get our hands on this fantastic game from the Star Wars franchise that is really a long awaited title.
Yep.
Not necessarily because of the amount of time that we've known about it, but because of what it represents. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of dive in with a couple of questions, share our experiences and first impressions, and we will have a full written review at Gamespace.com when we are done figuring out what we think of this thing.
Right.
So anyway, so the big question is, what is Star Wars Squadrons? Star Wars Squadrons is really an interesting it's really an interesting entry into the Star Wars games catalog, because it is a flight fantasy, I guess you could say.
That's a good way to put it. It is I think the every 12-year-old boy's dream as a Star Wars fan is what it is. To jump into an X-Wing or a TIE fighter and just go to town.
It is funny that you say that, because one of my earliest memories of gaming in the Star Wars universe was the release of the original X-Wing versus TIE fighter.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But Star Wars Squadrons kind of exists to fill that gap where we have not had a flight-focused Star Wars game in quite some time. It's been about 20 years.
Yeah, not to this degree or with this kind of focus. Like, I mean, we've had the Battlefront games did introduce us to some third-person stuff. I mean, the Old Republic has like kind of its version, but none of them are really that true, 1990s X-Wing style gameplay that we're introduced to in Squadrons.
Yeah, so Squadrons is a Starfighter combat game. I mean, that is the bread and butter of this thing. It is the Star Wars fantasy that is more experience than story. Now, that's not to say that there's not story. There's a single player element to the game, which I'll focus more on here in just a little bit. But Matt, one of the questions I want to ask you, because we kind of come at this from a couple of different perspectives here.
Yeah.
And which is why I wanted to talk to you specifically about this. What is it about Star Wars Squadrons that you've been excited for?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of a two-parter, because I grew up on the original X-Wing, and then X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and then X-Wing B-Wing, and then X-Wing TIE Fighter Defender of the Empire, and the list goes on and on and on. I mean, I grew up on all those games, and they were wonderful games as a kid. And so when EA kind of announced, hey, we're doing this thing, I mean, all of the nostalgia kicks into high gear at that point, right?
Of course.
Because, I mean, those were some of my favorite experiences as a kid and as a gamer back in the day. So that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is just, as a fan of space sims, it's, I guess historically those Star Wars space sims have kind of found a really good balance of arcade and simulation.
Sure.
Some people lean heavily into the simulation, some people like heavy into the arcade, but I've, at least historically, and when I was kind of, when first introduced to Squadrons, it really seemed like they were trying to capture that balance again that they'd had in the earlier titles of we want the simulation, we want the mechanics to feel like they would in a movie, but at the same time we also want people to be able to just get in there and have some fun with it. So it's not elite dangerous level of management. But it's got some strategy more so than a lot of the arcade titles. So
it's also not a rail shooter.
No, which, oh my goodness, yeah, thank you for that. I couldn't do another rail space sim shooter. It's just, I don't know, I'm just not there. So those are kind of the two things that drew me to it.
Yeah, for me, the big draw for me was that I think that the Starfighter Battles were my favorite part of Battlefront 2. That was the part of that game that I would repeatedly go back to. much more than the ground combat. The opportunity to be able to, again, it's fulfilling every 12-year-old's dream of, when you see Star Wars, you're like, I want to get into the cockpit of that vessel and scream through 100%. Asteroid fields and whatnot. But for me, that experience of having a game that is solely tailored to that is a really exciting thing. Now, confession here with this. Unfortunately, as you're watching this, you're watching Matt's gameplay and not mine. I'm terrible at these types of games, which is actually great, because when it comes to the story campaign, they have a tiered difficulty for that. So if you are somebody that is a seasoned flight combat gamer, it is a very challenging experience. But there's also a story mode, which I just recently switched over to that from one of the other difficulties. And the difference was amazing. It was absolutely amazing to feel how much more accurate your shots are.
Right. Auto aim just kicks up to 11.
It's a little bit, and it would seem like the materials that the opposing ships are made out of are slightly less durable.
Paper mache. It's great.
No Dora steel here, all
right.
paper mache.
That's right.
So yeah, this is, and it is an exciting time for Star Wars games, because we're seeing games like Jedi Fallen Order. We're seeing games like Squadrons that are really encapsulating that Star Wars experience of either becoming the Jedi or becoming the Starfighter pilot. And I feel like this is a really, really good direction as they're telling stories within the Star Wars universe.
What's nice about that too, and actually it's interesting, I follow Mark Hamill on Twitter, and someone had made a comment about they're thinking about rebooting or doing something with like Luke Skywalker during the original trilogy, and he's like, that's cool, like they were talking about an actor, and he's like, that's cool, but like there's like 30 years of storytelling that hasn't been told yet. Like we should hear some stories from that. And that's one of the things I kind of like about Squadrons and like Fallen Order and some of these new games we're seeing, is that they're kind of adding to, like they're actually developing canon, and it's exciting. That's why, I think that's why Mandalorian's such a big hit, and Star Wars Clone Wars and Rebels and all that, is because it's giving us better insight into the universe that we already love.
Right, which is where I want to get into the story campaign of the game. This is an area that I've spent a significant amount of time within as I've been playing Squadrons. I love story. I love good storytelling, and this feels very much like a Star Wars story, but it's on a different. It's in a different scale. Like that's one of the things that I appreciated about, and I'm sure that there probably some people out there that will excoriate me over this, but one of the things that I appreciated about Episode 7 was that Finn's story began very much as a soldier's tale. It was very grounded, and that's what this game feels like. The campaign of this game is it is the tale of the boots on the ground soldiers for the Rebel Alliance side. It is the New Republic side. It is the story of what happens next. This takes place after the events of Return of the Jedi, and you're seeing this fledgling rebellion turn into a republic, and the measures that are being taken in order to secure that future, and the hope for the galaxy. On the flip side, on the Imperial side, you have the stories of soldiers that their empire is crumbling, and the people are scattering, and there are factions that are breaking apart from the empire, and there's this sense of trying to figure out where you belong as a soldier in either a space where you're trying to make roads for where war is not necessary, or you're trying to fight to retain your place within the I guess within relevance, or within the context of what's going on within the greater galaxy. And so far it is really interesting. There are some there are a little bit of some issues that I'm taking so far with the not necessarily the story itself. I mean, it's a Star Wars story, so like it's one side has a really big ship. They build a really big ship to take out the other side. Like that's kind of of the Star Wars MO here, and that's happening. We just haven't seen a lot of lasers, Jedis, or Wookiees yet. But I'm not sure whether that's coming or not. We'll see. But the thing that has been a little bit difficult for me is that some of the storytelling in between missions feels rather stilted. The animations of some of the characters, while the character modeling is beautiful, the animations of some of those models is a little bit lacking. Like the expressions almost feel like just dead. Like as you're watching like two people have a conversation that's not like they're conversing. It's just two people standing in the same space, staring out into space and delivering their lines. And sometimes the lines just feel, they just feel like they're missing from one another. Now, there are some moments where you have one-on-ones with some of the characters that they feel very personal. But right now, that's kind of my biggest gripe about the story so far. But capturing when you're out in mission though, when you're out in space, and you know your only communication is audio with your squad mates, like this, it really does encapsulate the grounded experience of being a soldier in both of these factions, and I mean just doing your job. Like this is your lane. You're a pilot, and it's what you're good at, and you're going to stick to it. So that's kind of my impression of the story. Matt, you've actually been focusing more on the multiplayer aspect.
I'll be honest. I'm really only playing the story to unlock all the pretty things for my ships.
That's fair.
No, the bulk of my time has been spent in the multiplayer. That you do have to do the prologue before it unlocks dogfights. And then once you kind of get to the dogfights, I think at level 5 you can get fleet battles, which is the two main multiplayer modes. And dogfights are exactly what they sound like. But what I have really enjoyed about the dogfights though is you're not just floating in space and shooting each other. Each map has a very unique kind of setup for how it's played, as far as environmental, obstacles and things like that. So there's an asteroid field, there's an old like ship graveyard, and things like that. So it adds this really cool dynamic of strategy when you get into these dogfights, which again harkens back to a lot of the old X-Wing games, which is really, really great. So I've enjoyed that a lot. But I think the one that I think will have the long-term, excitement for people will be the fleet battles. It's such a cool idea. It's like this tug of war that happens, and essentially you have these two capital ships, then you have then you have like 4 corvettes, and then there's this dogfight that happens in the middle, and the whole battle is about pushing the other team back and taking out the other team's capital ship. But this tug of war happens over like team morale. So if you can knock out a bunch of their ships, it boosts your morale enough so that you can go on and push forward to the next objective. But at that objective, they can defend and actually push you back and then attack yours.
So it's basically like a MOBA in space.
To a degree, yeah. But think of it as a MOBA in space, except that there are times where you can actually, prevent the other team from attacking your towers by having better morale, like by knocking out more of their, taking out more of their fighters and corvettes and stuff like that. It essentially locks out their ability to attack your bigger ships. So what's nice about it is that it doesn't, like, it's not like, oh, we did phase 1, now we move on to phase 2. It's this very organic process of going back and forth. And I mean, I did a one today actually where I was playing on the Empire side, and it was skin of our teeth there. Like, I thought we were gonna lose it, and then we rallied at the last second and were able to push back, and actually, like, they were to our capital ship and we hadn't even touched their mid-tier stuff. But we were able to rally and actually come back and push all the way to the capital ship. So that's what's neat about it, is it's a very organic experience where it's not just about, having these ace pilots that are better than you, right? Like your standard multiplayer. There's a lot of strategy involved, and if you can coordinate as a team, you can actually flip it, even if you're not necessarily the better pilots. And I think that's what's going to draw people in, honestly, in the long haul. Is that?
So I have to.
Yeah.
I have to ask the all-important question.
Yes.
Mouse and keyboard or controller?
I mean, I don't know that I'm quite PC Master Race, but I do most of my gaming on PC, and I have to say that the controller has been the superior, device for me in this experience. I've found the mouse and keyboard to be just terrible to work with for this game, but the controller has felt awesome. Now, I haven't had a chance to try out like a joystick and throttle or anything like that. I'm hoping to get one here soon to try that out. Exactly. But as of right now, the controller is probably my favorite for a few different reasons. The biggest one being is it allows you to manage a lot of things very quickly and easily. Because again, this is another part about this game that's so great, is that you're managing your, if you're playing on the Rebel side, you're managing shields and weapons and speed. Your engines, and then if you're on Empire, for the most part, it's just weapons and speed. But you also, what's interesting there is you also have some abilities to like short-term boost those things because to compensate for the lack of shields. And so you have to manage those systems while firing countermeasures, while firing your secondary auxiliary weapons, while hitting your repairs, while targeting them, while controlling throttle and pitch and all these different things happening all at once. And the design and button layout has made that so simple to do in a combat situation where it becomes intuitive very, very quickly. And so I tried the mouse and keyboard. It just did not work for me. But as soon as I jumped on with my Xbox One controller, it was smooth as silk. So yeah,
it is interesting that you make the comments that you do, because I tried very hard to make the mouse and keyboard work for me.
Yeah.
I started out the mouse and keyboard, then jumped to controller, then back to keyboard for a while, and then I had to go back to the controller because I experienced the same thing, where there are just there are a variety of different options and buttons that you have, and so with that, the ability to manage them in a smaller space is, for me, again, was probably the better experience all around, and just kind of made me want to play the game a little bit more too. So there's that. So we're gonna round things out here because we're coming down to the end of our conversation here. Final question: does it fulfill the Star Wars fantasy for you?
Yes. I mean, I think 100%. If that fantasy is the Star Wars dogfight, yes, 120%, without a doubt. It feels good to play. It's fun to dogfight. Every kill feels earned. Which I really like. You work for every kill, and it's a great thing. And like from the onset with this game too, Blake Jorgensen, I think his name is. I'm terrible with names, so I apologize. Anyways, it's EA's CFO. He actually commented on this very thing that they designed this game specifically to help. He puts it this way: he says, we designed this game to really focus on what we heard from the consumers, which is one of their greatest fantasies, and that's to be able to fly an X-Wing fighter or TIE fighter and be in a dogfight. I mean, that is, at its core, that is what this game is, and it feels good. Yep. Every ship feels unique. Each faction has 4 ships that essentially are 4 classes. It's the same set of classes on each side, but each one flies and maneuvers and fires very distinctly to the class. But within that, you can get very customizable in how you want to fly it. And what I found very interesting is when I'm flying Empire, I fly a different class of ship than when I'm flying Rebel, which I don't know why, but it's just the way the ships feel. Like, it's that different. And so, yeah, 100%, I think it definitely fulfills that Star Wars fantasy of being in the dogfight.
Yeah, for me, that was the ticket right there. Was that every ship feels distinctive. Every ship has the opportunity to be customized to your play style with your kit for for the job that you're running. Whether it is you are trying to be that sneaky, you know, and get through those debris fields to set up those traps, or whether it is being strike fast, strike hard, sacrifice maybe a little bit of armor, armor quality to get there. I do love that this is a game that takes some of that extended universe stuff that we know about Star Wars from, whether it's novels or other games, or even just the Star Wars movie experiences of seeing Han Solo, kit out a Carillion cruiser to be one of the most agile and fast ships in the galaxy.
Here's hoping for a T-1300 expansion or DLC.
Right. What would we need on the other side, though?
Oh, well, there's the Lambda shuttle. There's a bunch of stuff you could swap in there.
That's true.
For sure.
That's very, very true.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I don't want to carry us out too far here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to check out our first impressions of Star Wars Squadrons here from Gamespace.com. We will have a full written review, like I said, coming up on the website very soon. But until then, we'll see you out there in a galaxy far, far away.